You in this battle, man, I'll soon be dead. I'll glue your face to my dick so I can fuck with your head. I got metaphors coming through my pores. You probably never been in a battle before, so I hope you realize your mistake. There ain't no party, got some candles, this won't be a piece of cake.
I'm in the backseat of your trunk with duct tape stretched out. Duck the fuck way down. Waiting to straight jump out. Grab you by the face and... Wait, how's it go? Come the fuck out. Turn you over. You want me to watch my mouth? How? Take my fucking eyeballs out and turn them around. I'll burn your fucking house down, circle around, and hit the hydrant so you can't put your burning furniture out. I'm sorry, there must be a mix-up. You want me to fix up lyrics while the president gets his dick sucked?
We're rolling.
Ooh. Oh.
I can leave it in.
Let's leave it in, dude. Let's make like my father did 34 years ago and leave it in. Folks, welcome to the Before Hours podcast, internet radio phenomenon hosted by an occasional morning person. If you like what you hear or if you dislike, I'm willing to get any engagement that you guys are willing to give me. So leave a comment on YouTube, like and subscribe, slide into my DMs, tell me that I look like Mark Zuckerberg, whatever you want to do. This is the Before Hours podcast, another solo edition. It's me, and I'm just checking in on you. I'm checking in on you, dude. That is me blatantly stealing Bill Burr's whole thing again, and I know I look like him, but it is what I say when I call my dad, because when I call my dad, I want him to know immediately that it's not an emergency and that I'm just saying hi, which... You know, it's never been an emergency, but I guess he's waiting for one. But yeah, I always say I'm just checking in on you. And he doesn't know that I'm referencing the Monday Morning Podcast by Mr. Bill Burr, who I met at New York Comedy Club one time, and I'm sure he doesn't remember me. It was back when I looked more like Chris Gethard, because I had my black rim glasses, and I didn't take care of my hair. I don't know. I'm in my hair era. For the past like 3 years, I've actually been styling my hair. Before that, I had a crew cut, and if I didn't feel like I looked like an insane person with a crew cut, I'd go back to having one because it's just so low maintenance, dude. You know what I mean? And I do get dandruff sometimes. I actually didn't have time to take a full shower today. For the folks watching on video, you could tell that I'm wearing a gray t-shirt with one stain on it, huh? And yeah, I wear a gray t-shirt or a white t-shirt when I don't get the chance to wash my hair that day, so that if there is any dandruff, nobody can see it. Not that you guys are like watching for my sex appeal. Are you? Is anybody? That'd be crazy. But there have to be a few gay guys that watch. They have like a very specific fetish, right? They're like a guy that looks like a cross between Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Burr. I don't know. Dude, Mark Zuckerberg, a little fucking evil. I know that, like, hot take, right? People have been making fun of him for looking like a robot for years, and now he's like Trump's best friend. So hasn't made a lot of friends and has made a lot of enemies. But I've been reading a book by Jonathan Haidt. It's called The Anxious Generation, and it's basically the thesis of the book is if you were born after 1995, your brain is gonna suck because you went through puberty while looking at Instagram, and those two things are not great. My friend Ben, I was telling my friend Ben Miller, friend of the show, he's a comedian and a man of science. And I was like, yeah, if you were born after 1995, according to this book, you're going to be depressed and anxious, 3 times as likely to be depressed and anxious as people in the previous generation. And I pulled that number out of my ass, by the way. This is a no facts zone. This is feelings, okay? And feelings don't care about your facts. What? But he was born in December of 1995, so he just missed the cutoff. And I know, like, I listened to Jonathan Haidt talk about his book on a podcast, and then I was like, okay, I got to read this book because it does sound, and I'm going to explain it poorly as I explain everything poorly, but the idea basically, before I started reading about it, I'm like, oh, is this going to be like Grandpa Simpson shaking his fist at the sky? Technology bad. But I mean, there's a lot of data, dude. Like, if you're a teenage girl, you shouldn't be listening to this, first of all. But Dude, Instagram is so bad for your brain if you're a teenage girl. That's like a whole chapter in the book. It's like, dude, if you want to like tank your self-esteem, go on Instagram, you know. And I know it's like everybody understands that the filters exist and airbrushing exists and stuff like that, but they've done studies where they'll show, I think it's people of both sexes and all ages. They'll interview them. I guess they'll interview them on like Skype or something, and or Skype, what year is it? Fucking Zoom. They'll like interview them, and then for a millisecond will like subliminally will show an attractive person of their gender, to the point where they don't even consciously notice it. But that, as compared to the control group when they didn't do that, that group that saw the hot people for less than a second were like more depressed and more anxious. Because I mean, we're fucking concerned about hierarchies, right? Everyone wants to act like they're not, but they are, dude. I mean, I know I am. I want to be the big dog. Actually, that's not true. I think if I was a perpetual feature, but I had enough money where I didn't have to do anything besides comedy, I'd be happy. Of course, that's what we all tell ourselves, right? Like that's the hedonic treadmill I think I talked about last time, right? It's like if you're, once I get this, I'll be happy. And then you get that thing and you're like, all right, what's the next thing? You know, you can't become happy. You could only be happy. Am I happy? I think so. I'm a little annoyed because I was walking here. I took the subway here, and no one knows that they're supposed to walk on the right. I'm the only person that got the memo. I remember the first time small tangent. This whole podcast is a tangent, but the first time I went to England, I was an adult, and I noticed, obviously they drive on the left in England, but I was in the underground, the subway, the tube. They pronounced tube with two U's over there. They had signs that said walk right. So I'm like, fuck, what is it? Like, if you go into the subway, they would have, first of all, I like that at least. At least there's instructions, albeit confusing instructions, but instructions nonetheless. So I'm like, okay, they drive on the left, but when you're walking the subway, you got to walk on the right. So which is it? So I Googled, I did the thing we all do now. Like I Googled, actually, I think this was before ChatGPT. So, or like Google AI. So, I got a bunch of like, when I Googled what side of the sidewalk do you walk on in the UK, I got a bunch of like unhelpful articles, like in the first page where it's like, the first paragraph is, you might be wondering what it's like to live in England. It's like, asshole, I just want the answer to my question. So then I did the thing where I was like, what side of the sidewalk do you walk on in the UK? Reddit, right? I'm like, let's see what the scholars on Reddit have to say. And one of the top rated comments was, what do you mean? What side of the sidewalk do you walk on? Don't you just go onto the sidewalk and walk? And as an adult, I was like, holy shit. It actually makes me like less impatient with people now. Cause I'm like, oh, people never got the memo, you know, but why would pedestrian traffic be any different than just getting in your car? The thing about car traffic, which I guess sounds redundant, but like there's laws about what side of the street you drive on, right? Whether it's on the right side in the US or on the left side in the UK, because that's the one thing you can't decide for yourself. Like we can't laissez-faire that one because we're going, 60 miles an hour, right? However many kilograms that is. Kilograms. Kilometers. And that's why there shouldn't be a law about what side of the sidewalk you walk on. That would be too draconian because the stakes are so much lower, right? You just you do the little shuffle thing. But there should be a norm, right? There's a difference between laws and norms, right? So maybe there shouldn't be a law that you have to walk on the right side of the sidewalk in the US, but there should be a norm, right? Walk on the same side of the sidewalk that you drive on when you're driving on the road. I think that's what I'm going to run for as a third party candidate. I'm going to Ross Perot the next election and see how that goes. I don't know. I think, do I have obsessive compulsive personality disorder? I might. OCPD, which is different than OCD, although they're comorbid. We had Zach on the other day. He talked about his OCD. He talked about constantly worrying about not getting hard, which is just such a funny, intrusive thought. I'm more like, I hope I don't get hard when I like don't want to be, you know? I'm at my most vulnerable at the gym, to be honest with you, dude. Cause like at the gym, you're wearing shorts and you don't have I have a humble penis, right? The listeners know. So if I'm wearing jeans, I could put it over the band of my jeans and it's fine. But God forbid I'm wearing shorts. Everybody's going to see, but that's the least upsetting thing that you could see at the Myrtle Wyckoff Bushwick Planet Fitness that I'm apparently making too much noise at. Although I will say, the few times I've been in a Midwestern Planet Fitness, every time I'm there, someone tells me to stop grunting. Because, I mean, the New York Planet Fitness, there are like fitness people that go there, right? Because that's New York. Like, they're everywhere. But like in the Midwest, you really... Dude, I walk into a Planet Fitness and I have the lowest BMI of anybody. And I'm on the higher end of BMI. I think I hover between 22 and 23, and of course 25 is overweight, which the majority of Americans are. And if you are, fucking change that. I used to be fat. It sucks. I think there's few things more annoying than a healthy weight person being quote unquote body positive, right? Because they don't know how fucking uncomfortable it is to be fat, dude. I'm 5'6". I was 190 with just a Homer Simpson beer belly and a bloated, gross alcoholic face, you know? It's the only time I looked my age, obviously, honestly. Like, I was 25 and I would say I was 25, and it's the first and only time in my life where someone's been like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, fucking, that's the thing. If you're fat, don't hate yourself, because that's not going to help you lose weight, but you should lose weight. I'm probably going to get demonetized for that. Yikes, dude. But I don't know. I was at the gym today. What did I do? I was a pull day, right? So bicep, backs. I only have one back, but I'm still getting dizzy on my last rep. And folks, should I go to the doctor? Probably. Will I? I don't think so. Although, assuming the doctor I saw last time still takes Medicaid, I might go to him because he fucking rules, dude. I wish I could remember his name. I think it's appropriate to shout out your Medicaid doctor for the other listeners that might live in New York and use Medicaid, but he's Chinese, which I think is great. I would have appreciated a heads up, though, dude, that everyone in the office was going to be Chinese. Both the people that worked there and the patients. Dude, I was the only gringo, right? I know Chinese people don't say that, but this is how Chinese the place was, dude, is the forms were in Mandarin first and then English underneath it. You know what I mean? Like, you know how most forms in America are like English first and Spanish underneath it? This was like, and I'm saying Mandarin, but I don't understand the difference between Mandarin and Cantonese. If are there any Chinese people, are you listening? I mean, I know if you lived in the West, you might be listening. Can people that live in China listen to this podcast without using a VPN? If you're a Chinese person listening to this legally, sound off in the comments, because I'd be interested to see. Shout out to China, honestly. Although I support Taiwan. So if that turns you off, dude, when I was in Edinburgh, which I pronounced correctly as you're supposed to, but it makes you sound pretentious when you're not a Scottish person. I was trying to get people to come to my show, and it was a weekday and it was raining, so fucking nobody was coming. I actually ended up doing that show, but I think it was 4 people that came. So who knows? But there was this Chinese guy that I thought was going to come to the show and he never did, but he was just so interested that my show was about American history. That he's like asking me my perspective on history and politics, like as an American. And I'm asking him, the same thing. And it's interesting, dude, because he fucking did not buy that he lived in a totalitarian regime, dude. He was not buying it. I'm like, yeah, Xi Jinping, he's been a leader for too long. And he's like, he's very good. And I'm like, he represses political dissidents. He's like, well, people, when they make trouble, they have to accept the consequences. I'm like, yikes, man. Because I think that's a very like in the West, we have this idea that if you live in a totalitarian state, they have you under the boot, and like everyone has a democratic mind, but they can't overpower the soldiers walking around goose stepping. But I don't know. I think there might be people in North Korea that are like, dude, I fucking love Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il. I never remember which one is the current guy, but I mean, and we only get to talk to the people that escaped, which is not a random sample of North Koreans. But yeah, I don't know. I'm having a nice time. I like that it's raining. I'm recording on January 31st. For those wondering, it is a Friday. And after I'm done recording, I'm going to do a spot at the comedy shop. And hopefully there will be people there. My girlfriend one time, she asked me if I was excited for a comedy spot. And I couldn't lie and say yes, because that's not how it works, or at least not for me anymore. It's like asking if you're excited for the next like slot machine pull, right? It's like, I guess. I mean, every once in a while the 3 turtles line up and I get some nickels, but more often than not it's like turtle, starfish. And I guess that's a metaphor. The turtle, starfish is like when the show is hosted by a guy that doesn't, or a woman that doesn't know what they're doing. And the audience is like people that think stand-up is you yell at the performer, or they only speak Polish and for some reason thought that it would be appropriate to go to a comedy show. That's the thing, dude, is we all operate under the assumption that everybody understands the same things. Like if I was in Poland, right, and I was walking down the street and someone said to me in Polish, free comedy show, my first question would be, what language is it in? And if they said Polish, I would simply not go. But I've done enough shows in hostels and in Lower Manhattan, where it's a lot of tourists, where they do not have a grasp of the English language, and they sit in the audience of a comedy show. I don't know what they think is going to happen. And I could hear the objections now. You're like, oh, just because someone's not laughing doesn't mean they don't speak your language, Bobby. But I've done crowd work with some of these people, and they'll look at me with this blank stare, and then someone in their life is next to them and whispers to them, and I realize they're interpreting. So I'm like, dude, what did you think was going to happen? But I don't know. Happens with French people. I use Polish as an example, but really I should have used French as an example, because 9 times out of 10, if someone doesn't understand me in the audience, they are from France. And I don't know if they're expecting like that a comedy show is going to be 2 mimes throwing pies at each other, but I guess it's something like that, dude. I don't know. It is cool to meet people from different cultures, though. I was during the day, I call people, I bother people on the phone. That's how I make most of my money these days. Some would say it's telemarketing, but I prefer inside sales representatives. But I called this guy. His name was Uday, Uday, and I actually knew how to pronounce it when I saw it. Because I know Uday Hussein, which is Saddam Hussein's son, who is arguably more evil than Saddam Hussein himself. Because Saddam Hussein, I mean, obviously, famous dictator. It's interesting. I think that I'm going to poo-poo Gen Z again. And sorry if you're listening. I hate that I sound like Grandpa Simpson twice in a row, but I think some younger people hear Saddam Hussein and they think, yeah, I guess he was a dictator, but America was wrong to invade Iraq in 2003. And that's a whole whether or not it was right to do that is complicated in my view, but he was evil, dude. He was genociding the Kurds and the Yazidis. Which doesn't, I mean, what I've learned is that the American left doesn't care about genocide that's being done by non-white people, even if the victims are also non-white people. It doesn't fit into the oppressor-oppressed narrative, which I get, because if you're consuming your news in 59-second chunks, how would you be able to parse complexity? But yeah, Saddam Hussein, bad guy. But his son, Uday, arguably worse. This is how evil Uday was. He would, and we got him. He was killed in 2003, I think. He was killed right before his dad was killed, I think. But when his dad was still in power, right, he was the king's kid, basically, who, if you're the king's kid, you're destined to be a piece of shit, right, or at least annoying. Looking at you, Prince guy that looks kind of like me as well. Yeah, Saddam Hussein's kid, Uday, he would look for weddings and he would kidnap the bride and the groom. And how do I not get demonetized or age restricted from saying this? He would violate the bride while the groom watched, which is that's like movie serial killer behavior. And this guy got to do that for years until the U.S. invaded Iraq. And they killed Uday. And I forget his brother's name. It rhymed, which I think is just fucking corny. They're just the Terrence and Phillip of dictator sons, I guess. I don't know. I'm thinking about South Park because I watched the episode where Cartman gets AIDS. I'm not just sure. I'm HIV positive. Dude, no one can say positive in front of me without me thinking of that phrase and then saying it. And then anyone that hasn't watched that South Park episode thinks I'm a lunatic. I think I'm turning into an old man. Because my dad has that thing with, God forbid, if you say the word gun or cannoli, my dad has to reference the line from Goodfellas, leave the gun, take the cannoli. Or is it leave the cannoli, take the... I have no idea. My dad would know. I've asked him to come on the podcast, but he's too shy. And I mean, of course, not everybody's a fucking open book like I am. My relationship with my dad is kind of interesting because he was a Republican that got turned into a Democrat by George W. Bush because of the Iraq War. So there was always this, I mean, not really, but there was always he was a little bit of tension because he was a little bit more conservative than me. I've always leaned left since I was old enough to start thinking about things. I've always leaned slightly left. But it's interesting now because I think he moved a little further left, in part because of me. I think he said that he's particularly on social issues. Cause I was dude, the fact that I was alive in a time where gay people couldn't get married is so fucking crazy to me. You know, I never fucked with. I was ahead of the curve on that one. And now I'm not on that side of the. That used to be a far left position, which of course, it's just common sense that gay people can get married. But he's always, even when he was more conservative, he's always hated guns. And I'm not an anti-gun guy. I think if I didn't live in New York City, I would have a gun. Yeah, and I don't mean this pejoratively. I think that he would even agree with this assessment. It's more of an emotional feeling on his end than a rational one. And again, I don't mean that pejoratively, but he was robbed at gunpoint as a young adult, and I think he was apathetic before guns, and then was very anti-gun after that, which is interesting because like I'm sure some people have had that life experience and thought like, well, I want to have a gun, and then there'll be an even playing field if someone tries to rob me at gunpoint again. But his perspective is like, I think he said to me, when someone has a gun pointed at you, the only thing you're looking at is the gun, which is like they function like titties in that way, I suppose. But yeah, because he used to work for, when he was I think in his early 20s, he was the night manager of a supermarket, and this is the 80s, and what they used to do, now they have like armored trucks do this, but it was the 80s, so they would have you take the cash that you made as a supermarket that day. Late at night, you would take this literally cash, this sack of cash. They might as well have put a dollar sign on it, like in the cartoons, right? And him and his friend would just get into one of their cars and drive to the bank, and the bank would be closed, but there'd be a drop off where you'd put the sack in the drop off, right? Like you're returning a library book. And surprise, surprise, some career criminals found out about this. So my dad's coworker was driving him to the bank. My dad gets out of the car. He's the passenger, right? So he gets out of the car, walks, I guess, a few hundred feet to this drop box, and this guy just comes up with a gun and puts the gun to his abdomen and says, put the sack down. Pause. No, he says, like, drop the money and then lay down on your stomach. And my dad actually did the thing you're supposed to do when someone's mugging you, right? They're being violent towards you, but they just want your money. Is he dropped the money and he ran, right? Because nothing good's going to come from you laying down, right? You don't let a criminal control your movement. A hostage situation is different, but who knows what this guy had planned. And yeah, if they're going to shoot you for running away, they would shoot you anyway. I've already talked about the Rory Miller Facing Violence book. That's where I learned all this stuff. But anyway, my dad gets back in the car. This is the funniest part of the story. And I wish he would come on. Guys, if we could bully my dad to come on the podcast, that would be great. Just leave a comment. I'll screenshot the comments. I'll show it to him. Let's peer pressure, not bully, but peer pressure my dad into coming on the podcast, because I think that he would be by far my oldest guest. But yeah, he gets back into the car. He's late to getting back into my friend's car. My friend somehow had no idea. It happened a few hundred feet away, but my dad's friend was just distracted and didn't see any of this. So my dad's like, we have to go to the cops. And he's like, why? What happened? So he tells him the story. They drive to the cops. My dad is interviewed by the cops. And they're being like kind of shitty, right? They're not, and you expect them to be empathetic, especially like you're basically, I mean, early 20s as a kid in my mind. God damn, I sound old. But to have such a, I mean, no matter how old you are, it's like that I would imagine that's an upsetting experience. But but they're not showing him much empathy. And eventually they asked him a couple questions in a way where my dad was like, do they think I'm making this up and that I'm an accomplice? Right? Because I guess that could be a thing that you would do, right? Fake a robbery. And my dad was like, do I have to talk to a lawyer? And then they were like, no. And then apparently later they called him back in and they're like, we caught the guy. We need you to verify what he looks like. And my dad was like, he was a white man about my age and height and build. And they were like, and he was wearing a striped shirt, right? And my dad's like, I was just looking at the gun. I didn't notice what kind of shirt he was wearing. And the cop is like, he was wearing a striped shirt, right? And then eventually, I guess my dad was like, oh, yeah, of course. And hopefully that was the guy. I don't know. Apparently my dad knew him. They didn't go to high school together, but they went to the same high school. This guy was like a little older than my dad, and he was like had trouble with I guess this was before opiates, so he was doing whatever people in North Jersey were doing that when they're addicted to drugs. I don't know. I've never been mugged. I've had two weird situations happen, and they were both with homeless people. And one was in the subway. I was walking. This is actually a little scary because I was walking towards the subway stairs. I was on the platform, right? And this guy, kind of an older looking, he looked like homeless, but not concerningly homeless. Like he wasn't like rocking back and forth or talking to himself, right? So I had to walk between him and, where the train's coming. And there wasn't a train coming, thankfully. And he fucking like lunges at me. He doesn't put his hands on me. If he put his hands on me, I would probably scoop one of his eyes out. But he almost does. And he yelled something. I forget what, but I got the vibe from him that he just needed to feel powerful for a second. And I get it. He's bigger. I have more money. Let's both enjoy that we're higher on different hierarchies, but I guess he didn't feel that way. And I went, hey man, just chill, just relax. And he went, all right. And I fucking, walked up the stairs, and, as I'm walking up the stairs, I hear some guy ask him if he's all right. And I don't fucking know what that was. They were both black. I don't know if that had something to do with it. If he just saw that interaction and assumed that I was being whatever the male version of a Karen is. But it seemed pretty clear to me that the situation was that this guy was being a crazy homeless person. And then the other one is actually kind of similar. I was walking. This is both shortly after the lockdown restrictions had been raised, right? So maybe that's part of it too. People are just like fucking on a edge, and there's the post George Floyd Ferguson effect, right? Which, I don't know if I Google Ferguson effect. I don't know if it's worth me explaining right now, but could have been that. But anyway, another homeless guy fucking just did this shit to me, like where you just want to make someone flinch. And again, I was like, dude, you have like relax. And luckily that was less, I was outside, so I could literally just like keep walking. But I don't know. It is, homelessness really is it's a fucking riddle. I saw this meme the other day, where it said there's more. Again, this is where I'm like, all right, some of my friends on the left are lacking critical thinking skills. Because the meme was, there's more houses than homeless people in America. It's not a housing issue. And I'm like, well, okay, first of all, what do we just let people that can't pay rent live in a house for free? I would stop paying rent if that was the situation. And even so, they would still have to pay the taxes. So you know, I don't know, if you're paying $18,000 a year in taxes, you should be able to make $18,000 a year no matter who you are, as long as you're not disabled. But I would imagine if your hobbies, how do I put this delicately? If one of your hobbies is smoking crack, you might not be able to make $18,000 a year. Or you actually, that's a pretty big fundraising motivation, but it's not going to go towards the property taxes. So, but that's the left-right divide in that, like, the right is sometimes devoid of compassion and the left is sometimes devoid of reason. And sometimes it's vice versa. I don't know. The most left-wing thing about me is that I don't believe in God, and I think religion is a bit silly, I'm going to say. I'm going to say that it's silly. And I guess one of the most right-wing things about me, and this going back to the gun thing, is I would have a gun if I could. I can't because I live in New York City and I have roommates. And if you want to have a pistol permit in New York City, you need to have everyone that lives with you sign an affidavit saying that they know and are okay with you having a firearm. And I get why they do that. It's probably a domestic violence thing, right? Like protecting women or men, I guess. Like, is your partner a crazy person, and therefore you're not going to sign off on an affidavit allowing them to have a firearm? I get that, and I would never want to make my roommates uncomfortable. But dude, that's why you guys gotta subscribe to the Patreon that doesn't exist yet, so that I could afford to live alone, and then I could buy a Glock 5 Gen 9, which is what the NYPD uses. I know for home defense, you're supposed to have a shotgun, but they say for New York City, your place is just not big enough, so don't worry about it. Get a pistol. But I actually know shit about firearms, and the way my brain works, like, I'm not a things oriented person at all. I don't care about how the mechanics work of anything. You know, I never got into cars. My dad, I remember when I was 16, I wanted to learn how to drive. I was one of those kids that like took the permit test on his 16th birthday. But I never gave a shit about how cars worked. I remember my dad was like fucking pissed at me because when I was like 16 or 17, he one day randomly asked me, when was the last time you checked the oil in your car? And I didn't even know that. I mean, I know a car has oil. I didn't know, this sounds so fucking stupid, I didn't know that you had to like check the oil. I didn't know how. And he didn't know to teach me because he assumed that I knew by nature of me being, well, not a man, a male that was driving age. And so he checked the oil and it was like fucking dangerously low. So stupid. And then so we drove to the convenience store near me, and I bought 3 things of oil, right? Kind of to overcompensate, I suppose. And I figured I don't need a bag, right? I could just hold them in my arms. And this is why it's funny that the left-right switch that my dad and I have gone through, because he was like, oh, no, he's already mad at me, right? He's like, oh, no bag. You want to protect the environment? And I'm like, nah, I just figured like, then you bring the bag home, and then what do you do with the bag? Every roommate I have lived with has had a drawer in our kitchen filled with plastic bags, like more plastic bags than we'll ever use. And that's like low grade hoarding. I think that is bag OCD if I've ever seen it. Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier. I don't have OCD. If I had a personality disorder, my understanding is that there's 10 of them. I don't think I have OCPD, but the one I have the closest to is OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, right? And it's different than OCD. OCD is an anxiety disorder where you have intrusive thoughts, and then you have rituals to try to alleviate those intrusive thoughts. OCPD obsessive compulsive personality disorder is an obsession with orderliness, rules, and lists, and a tendency towards workaholism. And I think I have all those things, except I think I'm pretty good at not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm a fucking idiot. I said not letting the enemy be the, wait, not be, do not, how's the fucking, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good is what I was trying to say. What I think I said the first time was don't let the perfect be the enemy of the goody, which is just my propensity to rhyme words together because I'm such a hip hop fan. Dude, I was listening to hip hop at the gym because I was like not feeling the workout today. Like one of those days where you just don't want to go. And I even guzzled a DC and was still like, I fucking don't want to do this. Even though it's bicep day, which is like, that's the day for the boys, dude. Right? And then, unfortunately, the next day is leg day, which is decidedly not for the boy. Watching some of these girls at the gym, dude, they put me to shame with how much they could squat, right? I mean, I could squat more than them, but like based on, you know, the percentage of their body weight, they could squat is higher than mine. That makes it sound like I'm staring at people at the gym, which I'm really not. I get in and out, you know. Oh, I had this thing. I had this thing today. Wait, no, not today. It was the last time I did shoulders. I like to do the farmer walks, right? And so I was walking around the gym with 50 pounds on each side, which is about my max, right? Like I'm almost dropping them by the time I get back to where I was as I do a circle around the gym. And that is getting to be stressful because as we've established at the beginning of the podcast, people do not know that they are supposed to look right. So yeah, I just do the farmer walks until someone almost bumps into me and then I drop the weights. We'll see. I might, no, you know what? Once I have money, I'm living alone. And then after I'm comfortable enough where I know I have enough money to live alone, then I will get a real gym membership, right? And then I could start blowing guys in the steam room. And then I'll finally be happy. Dude, what a time to be alive. Isn't it crazy that up until like a few decades ago, if you were gay, you just had to keep that shit to yourself? Like fuck a woman you don't want to fuck because you don't want to fuck any woman. And then look forward to the business trips where you could go to a truck stop and, you know, Daniel Craig it a little bit. You fucking put your leg out a little too far in the stall next to you. And then I guess he comes over and because if you've ever seen a glory hole in real life, please let me know in the comments or DM me on Instagram. I'm Bobby Sheen, LOL, by the way. Please follow me. That's how I convince bookers that I'm someone worth booking. Can't just tell them I'm good at stand-up. They have to know that I'm followed by a bunch of people. But don't spend more than 25 minutes a day being on it because it's bad for your brain. Unless that's what Jonathan Haidt says in his book that I was talking about earlier. I'm not sponsored by him. I'm into reading these books about, they're not dystopian because it's like what's happening now. You know what I mean? But it's bleak. But the book I read before this was The Better Angels of Our Nature, which is a book by Steven Pinker. And it's the idea that violence is going down and exponentially down. Like ever since the most violent we've ever been is like when we were, you know, breaking away from our common ape ancestor. And then the least violent we have ever been is now. And it doesn't seem that way because like, you know, the rage bait algorithms make it seem like shit is going down all the time. And we have the capacity to kill more people than we've ever had, of course. But last time a nuclear bomb has been dropped was in 1945. Let's see. Can I summarize how I feel about that in the next 2 minutes? Probably not. Better Angels of Our Nature is the name of the book. Check that out as well. And it actually comes from the last paragraph of the first inaugural address of Abraham Lincoln, which is much longer than the address he gave at his second inauguration. But the first inaugural address is basically him laying out why secession is impractical, illegal, and immoral. And it's very legalistic. And he ran it by his Secretary of State, Seward. And Seward was also a 5'6" redhead from the Hudson Valley. Pretty cool. And Seward was like, well, you have to add a paragraph at the end that kind of makes people feel, you can't just like lawyer your way through your first inaugural address. And that's when they add. So Seward gave him the original paragraph, which is way more wordy, right? Because remember, Seward was, came from a rich family, was formally educated in a way that Lincoln wasn't. Lincoln was great at making the common man understand him. So then Lincoln reworded the last paragraph and said, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave, and every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." And remember, folks, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. I'm just playing Night Owls. I love you.
Thank you.